The stars above the trade route were quiet. No ships, no signals, no movement. For 3 days, the merchant convoys waited for escorts that never arrived. Navigation buoys, usually blinking bright, now floated dead, their signals cut as if the void itself had swallowed them. Pilots whispered over private channels, voices tense, wondering if pirates had found some new weapon. But the pirates never left behind such silence. Pirates raided, killed, and took spoils. This was different. It felt like the stars themselves had gone empty. A scout ship, the Drathan's Wing, moved through the dark, its sensors scanning every ripple in space. Captain Cora leaned forward in her chair, staring at the black void on her screens. Nothing, her officer said for the 3rd time, tapping the console as if it would change. No ships, no debris, not even radiation trails. It's like the whole sector is gone. Then the signal came. It was faint at first, like static carried on solar winds. But the frequency was older than most records still stored in the Galactic Council's archives. The crew froze as the sound formed words. 2 words repeated. Over and over, low and distorted, as if whispered through a dying speaker. They're coming. The crew didn't know what language it was, but the translator spat out the same result each time. The words had weight, a sound that felt heavy. In the chest, the signal repeated for 2 full minutes before it stopped, vanishing like it had never been there. No source, no trace. Just gone, Captain Cora ordered the message sent to the council. She didn't notice at first that her navigator's hands were shaking as he tapped the relay. Captain, he whispered, do you think it's real? Or some kind of old distress beacon? Cora didn't answer. She was staring at the empty void beyond her viewport. Something felt wrong. The stars looked the same, but there was a stillness. Like prey sensing a predator it couldn't see, by the time her report reached the council, the first colony world had already gone dark. The planet Rither 4 was home to 7 million, a mix of Clith and Irani settlers. They had defense grids, patrol fleets, and planetary shields. But when a single transmission came through, it wasn't a call for help. It was a live broadcast, short and panicked. The council viewed it in a locked chamber, 100 representatives. From across the galaxy gathered around the hologram. The image was shaky, coming from a comms officer's hand cam. Alarms blared in the background, and the sky behind him was burning. Something no one could see what was moving through the upper atmosphere, black shapes cutting through clouds without thrusters or light. The officer's breathing was ragged, his voice hoarse as he shouted into the feed. They're not talking. They're not answering hails. They're just cutting through everything. Our weapons don't. The image cut to static. The feed never came back. Patrol ships sent to investigate found nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, not even a planet. The coordinates where Rither for once orbited its sun now showed only drifting ash and a thin ring of glowing dust. That was the first disappearance. It was not the last. In less than a week, 3 more worlds went silent. A mining moon, a trade hub, and an orbital station. Each time, no distress calls, no survivors, no clues, just empty space where life had been. Whispers began to spread among the merchant fleets, the smugglers, the scouts. Whispers about black ships silent fast, impossible to detect, gliding through space and leaving only death behind. Whispers about an old name, one that most thought was just a myth from the war thousands of years ago. Humans, no one in the council chambers wanted to speak the word. It was a ghost story, a warning told to soldiers and children alike. Don't provoke the Terrans, or they'll come for you. But everyone in that chamber felt the same chill when the reports came in. The signals, the vanishings, the black shapes. On the 7th day, another broadcast came. This time, from a patrol frigate on the edge of council space. The captain of the ship, a grizzled Varnan, looked pale as the hologram flickered to life. Behind him, alarms flashed red, and the sound of crew shouting orders carried through. We found them, the captain said, his mandibles quivering as he spoke. We picked up their trail near the dead zone. At first, we thought it was debris. Then the shadows moved. The recording shook as the frigate's hull rattled.
boundless.
A sound, like tearing metal, echoed faintly, though the comm system wasn't picking it up from inside the ship. The captain turned, eyes wide, staring at something off camera. They're here. Their static swallowed the feed. The patrol frigate was never found. The council ordered its coordinates quarantined, marking the entire region as a no-fly zone, but the fear spread faster than the order. Civilian traffic dropped by half across the inner sectors. Merchants refused to move their ships, even under heavy guard. Refugees began to pour into core worlds, muttering the same phrase over and over. They're back. In the dark edges of the galaxy, near forgotten ruins and long-dead stars, strange things began to stir. Ancient satellites, long buried in planetary crusts, activated on their own, transmitting signals no one could decode. Old wreckage from the Great Purge warships that had floated lifeless for thousands of years suddenly powered up, engines humming like they had never stopped. One scout, drunk and terrified in a core world bar, claimed to have seen one of the black ships up close. He said it didn't move like a ship at all. No engines, no lights, no heat. It glided through the void like a shadow that decided to take shape. He swore he saw its hull shift, metal folding and twisting as though alive. No one believed him, but no one laughed either, in a sealed chamber beneath the council's main spire. The highest-ranking members watched the growing reports. They listened to every whisper, every survivor, every desperate theory. Finally, an old historian of frail Luthery who had studied the Purge war archives for centuries spoke up. "You're all thinking it," he rasped. His voice cracked as he leaned forward. "It's them. It's the Terrans. You know the records? You know the stories? No fleet, no army, no weapon could stop them until we purged them." Another counselor hissed. "That purge was 10,000 cycles ago. They were wiped out. Nothing survived." The historian's milky eyes narrowed. "Are you certain? Or did we just make ourselves believe it because the alternative was too terrifying?" The chamber fell silent. Outside, in the endless dark, another beacon activated. A long-dead relay station near the uncharted rim flared to life, sending out a repeating transmission. Not distress, not coordinates, a single word in a human voice. "Soon." Signal echoed across the network, bouncing from relay to relay, reaching every listening ear. Traders, pirates, and even warlords stopped what they were doing when the message came through. No one knew where it came from. No one could trace it. But everyone understood something was coming, and this time the galaxy wasn't sure it would survive the storm. The council had never been this silent. Normally, their chambers were filled with arguments, voices rising and overlapping as hundreds of species debated trade routes, border disputes, or pirate activity. But now, no one spoke. The lights in the chamber felt dimmer than usual, though no one had lowered them. The tension itself made the air feel heavy, as if the walls of the massive room were closing in. Every screen along the chamber's walls showed the same thing: data logs, grainy reports, fragments of signals, and the same two words repeated again and again. "They're coming." And now, a new word added by the latest broadcast soon. No one wanted to be the first to say it, but the whispers had already spread outside these walls. Entire fleets were refusing orders. Civilian traffic had dropped to almost nothing, with whole sectors declaring martial law. Every day, another world or station went dark. It was Counselor Rachel, a towering Serati, who finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but her frilled neck was trembling. These incidents, they matched no known pirate tactics, no known technology, no signals, no demands, no survivors. Entire planets erased. This cannot be coincidence. An archivist, young by his species standards, shuffled forward nervously, carrying an ancient data core wrapped in preservation seals. His hands shook as he placed it on the central display table. The core looked older than most of the members' present hits. Casing marked with rust, its symbols worn down to faint scratches. "We searched the restricted archives," the archivist said, voice low. There were fragments, records, from the Purge War. At the mention of the Purge War, the chamber grew even colder. Many of the younger delegates had only read about it as a cautionary tale, the last great galaxy-wide war that had united hundreds of species against one enemy. But to the older ones, the name still carried the weight of nightmares. Billions dead, entire star systems burned. And at the center of it, all humanity. The core activated, projecting a flickering hologram. The image showed a battlefield among shattered moons, fleets clashing, plasma and rail fire lighting up the void. But the perspective was from a ship-a-cliff battlecruiser, its view shaking as alarms blared. Dozens of alien ships filled the screen, firing at a single point in the darkness ahead. That point flickered, disappeared, and then without warning, appeared behind them. The feed showed a black shape, massive but sleek, gliding through space as if it ignored inertia and physics altogether. Its weapons fired with no visible charge, beams of light so bright they cut through shields like paper. Within seconds, half the Clith fleet was gone. The remaining ships scattered, their coms filling with screams in a dozen languages. Then the black ship vanished again, fading from sensors like smoke blown away by wind. The recording ended abruptly, cutting to a final line of text in an ancient script. The translation scrolled across the council chamber's display. Terminate all Terran contact. Exterminate, if even one remains. No one is safe, the archivist shut the core down and stepped back, his hands still shaking. This was buried, he said softly, hidden for over 10,000 cycles. Only fragments survived, but every mention of humans, every encounter, it was the same. They didn't fight for territory. They didn't negotiate. They didn't surrender. They only fought until nothing stood against them. Counselor Jarek, a stout, scaled Goroth, hissed sharply. Those are old myths. We won that war. The Purge ended them. Nothing could have survived. The historian who had spoken in the last meeting, the frail Lutheri, stood again. His voice was rough, a rasp that sounded like dry leaves scraping stone. Did we win, or did they simply stop? His milky eyes scanned the chamber. We told ourselves they were wiped out. But what if they weren't? What if they chose to disappear? To wait? Rachel's frill twitched. Wait. For what? The historian's bony hands tightened on his cane. For this? As if on cue. Another alert sounded through the chamber. New transmission was playing across the galactic network, bypassing firewalls, overriding private channels, reaching every ship and station with a receiver. The message was only audio, a faint, distorted whisper that didn't match any known language. But the translators all returned the same phrase. You thought we were gone. The voice didn't sound angry, didn't sound loud. It was calm, almost cold. As if whoever or whatever spoke didn't need to raise their voice. The transmission cut off after 7 seconds. No source was found. No signal trail. The panic outside the chamber grew worse. Fleets deserted. Entire colonies evacuated. Refugees begging for transport to the core worlds. The council tried to issue statements, calming the public, promising protection. But the people knew better. They had seen the recordings. They had heard the whispers. Far from the core, on the edge of council space, scavenger crews began reporting. Strange discoveries. On 3 different planets, buried deep under rock and sand, they found human structures. Metallic black, untouched by time.
Ow.
The structures weren't ruins. They were intact. When explorers approached, the structures came alive. Lights flickered on, power surged, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. Entire excavation teams vanished without a trace. One drone recorded a single image before going offline, a massive door sliding open, revealing darkness beyond, and the faint red glow of something waking inside. On a forgotten moon, an independent trader found a derelict warship. Its design didn't match any galactic database. The hull was smooth, seamless, with no visible thrusters. The trader claimed he never saw it move, but when he blinked, the ship was closer. He fled before anything could happen, abandoning his cargo and sending only a brief, panicked message before his signal died. The council began to argue again. Some wanted to mobilize every fleet to strike first before the threat fully emerged. Others demanded negotiations, even if the humans wouldn't respond. A few suggested abandoning entire sectors, retreating to fortified worlds, and waiting out whatever was coming. But no one could agree, because no one understood what the humans wanted, if they were still human at all, in the shadows of the chamber. Unnoticed by most, the historian muttered to himself, "They aren't like us. They never were. But they don't fight for the same reasons. Territory, resources, pride, none of that matters to them. The old record said it. They fight because once they are threatened, they don't forgive. They don't stop." Another alert interrupted the meeting. A council surveillance drone, stationed near a collapsed star, had sent a final transmission before its feed cut. The footage showed the blackness of space, a faint ripple of distortion, and then a shape. Enormous, silent, moving with impossible precision. Its hull reflected no light, no energy signature, but its outline was clear against the starfield. As the drone focused, a single red light blinked along the ship's side. Not a weapon, not a signal, just a single point of light, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. The drone's sensors failed. The feed ended. By the end of that day, 3 more sectors reported missing colonies. The council tried to prepare to rally fleets, to find a way to predict where the black ships would strike next. But no pattern emerged. No warnings came. Only silence. And then, without warning, a final transmission reached every network in the galaxy. Not static, not distortion. A human voice, clear this time, without the distance or echo of the older signals. Calm, deliberate, impossible to ignore. "We have not forgotten." The message repeated once, then stopped, across the galaxy from the richest core world to the most remote mining outpost. Every being who heard it felt the same thing. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even hatred. It was a promise. And promises, everyone remembered, were the one thing the humans never broke. The Clith Empire had ruled its corner of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Their fleets patrolled the hyperlanes, their banners hung on hundreds of worlds. And their enemies learned long ago that resistance meant extinction. But on the far edge of their territory, in a quiet system known only for its mining colonies, that old confidence began to crack. The first report came from a border outpost. It was a short, frantic transmission, almost drowned out by static. The voice was strained, the background filled with alarms. Multiple contacts, no drive signatures, no energy emissions, they're just appearing. Shields, useless. Weapons. The message ended there mid-scream. When the nearest patrol arrived, they found the outpost gone. Not destroyed, gone. Out. Only a faint dust ring remained where the station's orbit once was. The Clith High Command dismissed it as a freak accident, or pirate weapon. They sent a full battle group to investigate. 20 warships, fully armed, their hulls gleaming black and gold under the light of the twin suns. These ships had crushed rebellions, burned enemy fleets, and stood undefeated for generations. There, commanders had no reason to fear, not until the darkness came. It began with a shadow. No light, no thrusters, just a ripple across the stars, like something vast was gliding just outside the edge of sight. Sensors failed one by one, screens flickering to black. The Clith ships powered up weapons, their captains shouting orders. But every lock-in failed. Every missile lost guidance. Yet the shadows moved closer. Then the fleet saw them. Ships, if they could be called that. Black shapes, enormous and silent, sliding through space without sound or signature. Their surfaces were smooth and shifting, as though the metal itself was alive, flowing like liquid. They had no engines, no weapons ports, no visible command centers. Yet as they drifted closer, the stars behind them seemed to dim, as if the void itself bent to their presence. The Clith opened fire. Plasma cannons, railguns, missiles all fired at once, a storm of light and fury. For a heartbeat, the dark shapes were lit by the barrage. Then the light vanished, absorbed by some unseen field, as though the weapons themselves had never existed. The black ships didn't even slow down. One of the Clith destroyers turned to flee, its thrusters flaring bright as it tried to jump faster than light. A single flicker of light flashed from one of the black ships. There was no sound, no explosion. The destroyer simply broke apart. Its pieces scattered across the void, cut so cleanly that some sections still had power as they drifted away. Lights flickering like dying embers. The rest of the Clith fleet panicked. They scattered, trying to retreat, but the black ships were faster. They didn't move like normal vessels, didn't accelerate or decelerate. They simply shifted from one position to another, covering impossible distances in seconds. As if space itself bent to let them through. Within 3 minutes, the entire battle group was gone. Not a single distress call escaped. Only one fragment of data survived, buried deep in the wreckage of a patrol corvette, later found drifting. It was a single audio clip, corrupted but still clear enough to make the council tremble when they heard it. Clith officer, voice shaking, screaming to words before the recording cut into static. The Terrans. Word spread fast, faster than the council could contain it. The name, once a myth, now became a warning on every comm channel. Smugglers, pirates, and even rival empires stopped their feuds, trading rumors instead. They said the humans had been building in the dark for millennia. That they had ships grown, not built. Their hulls forged from something not entirely metal. That they no longer needed fuel, food, or even air. Some swore the Terrans weren't flesh anymore. They had given up their bodies to survive the purge, becoming something colder, something that couldn't die. Others claimed they had found a way to bind their minds to their ships, becoming their vessels, a fleet of living ghosts. The council didn't know which stories were true, but they knew one thing. The Terrans weren't just striking random targets. Every attack so far had been against worlds and stations once ruled by the Clithosame species that had led the purge against humanity in the ancient war. It wasn't conquest, it was vengeance, but vengeance on a scale the galaxy had never seen. The next strike came at a Clith core world, a fortress planet named Drelvos. It had orbital cannons, planetary shields, and an entire defensive fleet in orbit. Billions lived beneath its skies, confident that no enemy could breach its defenses. When the warning came when distant patrols reported shadows moving toward the system, the people didn't panic. They trusted their fleets. The fleets lasted for minutes. Witnesses on the planet's surface saw flashes in the sky, silent bursts of light as their ships fell one by one. The black shapes didn't even target the defenders first. They slipped past, surrounding the planet, their hulls shimmering with strange, red-lit patterns. Then, without firing a single visible shot, they broke the planetary shields. No bombardment. No explosions. The shields just collapsed, their power drained to nothing. The last thing any survivor saw was the sky turning red. Not from fire, but from the glow of the Terran fleet above, their patterns pulsing in unison like a single, enormous heartbeat. Then everything went dark. The broadcast from Drelvos was short. Only one transmission made it to the wider galaxy before the planet vanished from every star chart. A child's voice crying, whispering in the Clith tongue, "They're here." After that, the Terran fleet disappeared again, vanishing into the dark as quickly as it had arrived. No one knew where they would strike next. No one could find them. Entire sectors shut down their beacons and went silent, hoping the Terrans would pass them by. But deep down, every species knew the truth. The Terrans weren't here to conquer. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to finish something they had waited 10,000 years to begin. In the halls of the Galactic Council, leaders whispered to one another behind closed doors. Some wanted to surrender, even if the Terrans ignored them. Others wanted to rally every fleet left in the galaxy, to throw everything they had into one final stand. But most simply waited, staring at the star maps, hoping the shadows wouldn't find them. On a distant listening post, far beyond the edge of charted space, a single relay detected movement. The crew watched their screens as hundreds of faint black shapes emerged from a nebula, gliding silently toward a cluster of stars. They were slow, deliberate, moving in perfect formation. The crew didn't know what the targets were. They didn't care. They sent one warning before cutting their own beacon and fleeing into deep space. The warning was 3 words, transmitted to every network they could reach. The Ghost Fleet. Across the galaxy, beings of every species listened to the message. Some prayed, some prepared to flee, some swore vengeance even as fear froze their voices. But all of them, deep inside, felt the same cold truth sink into their bones. The Terrans were awake, and they weren't going back to sleep. The galaxy had known war before. Empires rose and fell. Fleets clashed. Worlds burned. But none of it felt like this. Those wars had rules and omnis to negotiate with, weapons to study, time to react. Now, there were no rules, no warnings, only shadows that appeared without sound, destroyed without hesitation, and vanished before anyone could understand how. The name Terran spread through every com channel, every backroom deal, every dark corner of the galaxy. Some whispered it like a curse, others like a prayer, but all spoke it with fear. Refugee ships packed the hyperlanes, overflowing with people who abandoned their homes before the shadows came. Whole sectors went silent, not because they were destroyed, but because their governments shut off every beacon and transmission. Hoping to make themselves invisible, trade collapsed. Pirate clans abandoned raiding to turn into transport crews, charging fortunes to smuggle frightened families to safer worlds. Safe, of course, was only a word now. No one truly believed there was anywhere safe. The Terrans didn't follow the paths. Others did. They ignored fortified systems, skipped rich core worlds, and instead struck wherever they pleased. There was no pattern anyone could see, only destruction. In the Galactic Council, desperation took over. Plans were made and abandoned within hours. One group of species demanded a massive fleet. Every warship left in the galaxy gathered to face the Terrans head-on. Another group argued to find some way to communicate, even if the Terrans had ignored every hail so far. Others suggested retreat, abandon the outer sectors, fortify the core, and pray the humans wouldn't push further in. Every time the Council argued, another system went dark. One of the worst came 2 weeks after Drelvos, the planet Harvin Prime, was not Clith territory, but it was allied with them centuries ago during the Purge War. It was a thriving world, rich in trade, with 20 orbital stations and a defense grid stronger than most capitals. The people there trusted their shields, their fleets, their allies. The attack didn't even last a full hour. The first sign came as every satellite and beacon in the system died at once. No explosions, no hacking alerts. It just went dark, as if power itself had been drained from reality. The defense fleet scrambled, weapons armed, but nothing appeared on sensors. The commanders barked orders, thinking it was sabotage, until the shadows slid out of the void. Witnesses on the orbital stations later described it before they died. The Terran ships didn't just arrive, they unfolded. Space itself seemed to twist, like a reflection on water being disturbed. One moment the stars were normal, the next they rippled, and the black shapes emerged, their holes glistening faintly like liquid metal. Red veins of light pulsing through their surfaces. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't fire immediately. They just waited. The defense fleet opened fire, panicked. Nothing landed. Beams bent away, missiles detonated harmlessly, and the shadows began to move. Slowly at first, drifting like predators circling prey. Then, with a suddenness no ship could match, they struck. Not with visible weapons, but with silent bursts of light that erased matter completely. Ships didn't explode, they came apart, sliced into fragments or erased entirely as if they had never existed. Within 20 minutes, the entire defense grid was gone. 10 minutes later, Harvin Prime itself was wrapped in the dark silhouettes, their red-lit veins pulsing faster. Now then the planet's core destabilized. No one understood how. No weapon fired, no strike hit the surface. The planet itself simply tore apart, breaking into molten fragments that floated in a glowing ring where Harvin Prime had been. No distress calls escaped. The only surviving record came from a deep space telescope on the far edge of the system, which captured the moment the planet cracked. At the very end of the recording, as the Terran fleet shifted back into the void, a transmission pulsed from one of their ships. It was faint, low, and brief. 2 words in a language most had never heard, but which the translators rendered instantly. For the Fallen, after Harvin Prime, panic turned to chaos. Riots broke out on dozens of worlds. Armies were recalled. From frontiers, fleets pulled back to defend home sectors, but none of it felt like enough. The Terrans didn't need to invade planets. They didn't land troops, didn't seize territory. They simply destroyed and then left behind only silence. Some species tried to surrender, broadcasting pleas on every frequency. They promised tribute, obedience, anything to be spared. The Terrans didn't answer. They didn't even acknowledge the signals. Other species tried to strike back, sending their most advanced stealth fleets to hunt the ghost ships. Them returned. The few fragments of black boxes recovered later contained no battle logs only, static and one distorted sound. Like distant hollow breathing. Rumors grew darker. Some claimed the Terran ships weren't ships at all, but colossal creatures, machines fused with the remnants of their creators. Others said the Terrans had died long ago, but their minds had been copied into an endless swarm of machines that could rebuild themselves forever. A few whispered something worse, that the Terrans were still alive. They had changed, abandoning what they once were for something colder, something that no longer thought like other beings. None of the rumors could be confirmed, and none of them mattered because no one had found a way to stop them. On a hidden world far from the core, a council strike team made one final attempt. They lured a Terran vessel into a trap of fleet of 50 ships, using experimental weapons designed to tear through any shield or armor. The trap lasted less than 3 minutes. Only 2 council ships escaped, both heavily damaged. The survivors reported nothing but a single repeating sound over their comes as they fled. A slow, steady beat like a heartbeat echoing through the void. The Terrans didn't pursue them. They never did. They struck, they erased, and then they vanished back into the black, leaving only fear behind. Across the galaxy, leaders stopped speaking of resistance. Even those who had once called for unity now whispered of retreat, of finding a way to hide. Some suggested abandoning entire arms of the galaxy, fleeing to uncharted regions beyond the rim. But even then, no one believed they could truly escape. Because no one knew how far the Terrans could reach, or if the dark beyond the maps was already theirs. On the fringes of space, deep in a silent nebula where few dared travel, a single scout drone recorded something new. A formation of Terran ships, not scattered, but moving in perfect lines. A fleet so vast the drone's sensors couldn't count the shapes before failing. They weren't heading for a single world this time. They were moving toward the center of the galaxy, toward the core itself. The drone's last transmission was a single line before its signal cut. They're coming for everyone. The galaxy was burning. Not all at once, not in a wave of fire, but in pieces. World by world, station by station, the Terrans erased entire places as if crossing names off a list. No one understood how they chose their targets. Some worlds were rich, others poor. Some were militarized fortresses, others simple colonies. But each time when the survivors searched old archives, they found the same pattern. Every destroyed world had been tied to the Purge War. The Council tried to keep the connection secret, but too many saw the records. The panic only deepened. Some species had never even existed during the war, but their ancestors had supplied fleets, fuel, weapons, or intelligence to the Purge. They thought the past was buried, a forgotten stain. Now it was killing them. On the Council's central spire, high above the shining city below, the remaining leaders gathered in a locked chamber. Half the seats were empty, their owners either dead, fled, or refusing to answer the summons. The air was heavy with tension. Every delegate glancing at the others as if expecting betrayal. In the center of the chamber, a captured Terran device sat on a pedestal. It was no larger than a helmet, black and seamless. its surface shifting faintly as if breathing. It had been taken from a shattered Terran probe, the first intact object anyone had managed to recover. The device pulsed with a faint red glow, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. "Activate it," Counselor Rachel ordered, her frill flattened against her neck. "If there are answers, we need them now." The engineers obeyed, linking the device to the Council's systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chamber's lights dimmed, and a projection filled the air. Not a person, not a creature, but a swarm of shifting shapes that slowly formed into something humanoid. Face, pale and strange, its features blurred as though not fully solid. When it spoke, its voice was calm, steady, and cold. "We do not want war. We want justice." The delegates froze. The projection's voice carried no anger, no hatred, but something deeper, heavier, like a promise that could not be broken. The figure tilted its head, as if studying those who watched. "You hunted us. You burned our worlds. You killed our children. For that, we remember. For that, we answer." The image shifted, showing a list of worlds. Dozens of names, most crossed out in bright red. Others still glowed, untouched for now. Every world on the list had one thing in common. During the Purge War, they had either sent fleets to destroy human settlements or had profited from their destruction. Counselor Jarek rose, his scaled body trembling. "If this is their demand, we can pay tribute. We can give reparations. We can..." The figure's face turned toward him. "No tribute, no negotiation. Those who spilled our blood will answer for it. Those who shield them will share their fate." The projection flickered, and the humanoid form began to dissolve back into the swarm of shapes. Before it vanished completely, the voice spoke again, softer but unmistakable. "Stand aside or burn." The chamber went silent after the projection faded. No one moved, no one spoke, for nearly a full minute. Then Rachel broke the silence, her frill trembling. "They are not here to conquer. They are not here to enslave. They are here to erase history's debt. That list is death, and half our worlds are on it." Across the galaxy, whispers grew. Louder. Entire governments began abandoning their allies, cutting off communications, and sealing their borders, hoping to prove they had nothing to do with humanity's fall. Others tried to erase records, burning entire data archives, as if the Terrans wouldn't know. But everywhere, fear replaced reason. Borders collapsed. Trust dissolved. Some worlds turned on each other. Races that had fought alongside the cliff during the Purge suddenly found their colonies attacked by neighbors desperate to prove loyalty to the Terrans. Old alliances shattered overnight. The galaxy wasn't just falling apart because of the Terrans' attacks. It was destroying itself out of fear. Far from the chaos, a lone research vessel worked in secret, boarded a Lutheri historian, the same one who had warned the Council before, sifted through ancient records scavenged from dead archives. He pieced together fragments of logs, battle reports, and whispers from the Purge War. And there, buried in encrypted files older than any modern database, he found something terrifying. Humanity had not been defeated in the Purge War. Not truly. The records showed that the final battle, the one celebrated as their extermination, had been a trap. Humanity's last fleets had drawn the Purge forces deep into uncharted space. Both sides suffered losses, but the humans' last transmissions were not cries for help. They were coordinates, directions to deep space vaults and hidden strongholds. They had not been wiped out. They had gone dark. Waiting, the historian's hands shook as he stared at the final line of the decrypted file. A note written in an old, crude galactic standard was a message, short and grim. They will sleep. When the stars remember their names, they will wake. Before the historian could transmit his findings, every system on his ship shut down. The lights dimmed. Faint hum filled the air, low and steady, vibrating through the hull. Outside, the stars seemed to blur. Black shapes slid into view, gliding silently past the viewport, its red veins pulsing softly. A voice echoed through the ship's comms. Not a broadcast, not a recording, A live voice, calm, even polite. You have seen enough. The ship was never heard from again. On the Council's core worlds, more Terran messages began to arrive. Not threats, but simple statements. One relay received only a single sentence before its circuits burned out. The list grows shorter. The meaning was clear. The Terrans would not stop. They would not slow down. And when the list was done, no one could say what they would do next. Leave, stay, turn their gaze on those who thought themselves innocent. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy's most powerful empires no longer argued about resources, trade, or dominance. They whispered only one question among themselves, the same one that spread across every frightened world. When the Terrans finish their list, will anyone be left? The galaxy grew quieter with every passing day. Not peaceful never, peaceful but silent, as if life itself was trying not to draw attention. Trade lanes that once glowed with traffic now lay empty. Worlds that had once broadcast music, news, and chatter into the stars kept their signals dark. No one wanted to be noticed. No one wanted to be next. The Terrans had not struck in 12 days. For some, that pause brought hope. Perhaps the humans were slowing down, or perhaps their vengeance was complete. But for others, the stillness was worse than the destruction. It felt deliberate, as though the Terrans were waiting for something, or someone. On the Council's core world, rumors spread faster than any official statement. Refugees whispered of ghost signals heard in the deep void, fragments of old human voices repeating numbers. Locations or warnings no one could decode. Others swore they had seen Terran shapes watching from the edges of nebulae, never attacking, only observing. One freighter pilot claimed his sensors detected dozens of black ships trailing him across 3 systems. But when he turned his ship's lights on, the shadows vanished, leaving only empty space. The Council could no longer hide the truth. They had decoded enough fragments from Terran broadcasts to know the pause wasn't a retreat. It was preparation. Then, on the 13th day, the dead began to speak. It started with an old derelict, a wreck from the Purge War that had drifted in the void for 10,000 years. Salvage crews had avoided it for centuries, fearing it's unstable. But now, every ship within 10 light-years received a sudden transmission from the wreck. The voice was faint, almost broken, as if played on a loop from a machine barely alive. They are awake. You cannot stop them. Do not run. Running only feeds the fire. The voice cut out, replaced by static. Before anyone could trace it, the derelict detonated, a silent explosion that lit the void like a dying star. Every salvage ship that had been nearby was vaporized. 3 days later, another signal appeared, this time from a dead world, long stripped of resources. It had no atmosphere, no cities, nothing to justify its existence on any star chart. Yet somehow, every relay in the sector played the same message. A calm human voice, not distorted, not whispering. You built your empire on our bones. You buried us in ash and told yourselves we were gone. Now, you will hear the voices you silenced. The message didn't end. It repeated endlessly, even when relays were shut down, even when entire networks were destroyed. The voice kept coming, bypassing physical systems, as though the words themselves were carried on something deeper than ordinary transmission. Those who listened too long claimed they could hear more beneath the voice's faint screams, the echoes of battles long past. Whispers in languages no one had spoken in thousands of years. Whole colonies began to evacuate, abandoning habitable worlds for deep space. Not because the Terrans had attacked, but because the voices alone drove them to terror. There were no threats, no demands. Only reminders. Reminders that the humans had not forgotten and that no one could truly hide from them. On the 16th day, a Council deep space array captured something new. A signal, stronger and more deliberate than the ghost messages. It came from a region of space where no ships dared travel, a vast graveyard of wrecked fleets from the Purge War, where the ruins of thousands of vessels floated like frozen corpses around a dying star. The signal was not sound. It was a pulse, a repeating wave of energy, impossible to trace, impossible to block. The pulse matched no known frequency, but the array's systems translated it into a single phrase, burned into every display in bright crimson text: "We are coming." The council panicked. Fleets were mobilized, planets fortified, but no one believed it would matter. The Terrans had never been stopped, not even slowed. The council's only hope, they thought, was to find some way to communicate, to beg, reason. Even knowing that those who tried before had been ignored, they had no other choice. A desperate transmission was sent. Using every known and forgotten frequency, every ancient human code scavenged from the archives. It was a plea, not a challenge. We acknowledge the purge. We acknowledge our crimes. We ask for talks. What will make you stop? For 2 days, there was no reply. Then, a response came. It's not a broadcast, not a recording. Live transmission. Received only on the council's secure line. The voice was human, deep and steady, speaking in the old tongue. Translated automatically for all to understand. There is nothing you can give us. Nothing you can say. This debt is not paid with words. The council's speaker, her voice, trembling, tried again. Then tell us what you want. What will end this? The silence stretched so long that some thought the humans had ended the transmission. Then the voice spoke again, quieter this time. When the last name is gone, we will decide if the galaxy is worth leaving alive. The line went dead. In the days that followed, more derelicts woke. Old human satellites buried deep under ice or sand activated and began transmitting. They did not send threats, only recordings, faint glimpses of the Purge War. Images of cities burning, human civilians hunted, fleets surrounding worlds and erasing them without mercy. It was as if the Terrans wanted everyone to see the past they had tried to erase, to understand why death was coming. Then came the final message, the one that froze the entire galaxy in fear. It appeared on every screen, every projector, every communication device, without warning, without signal. The image showed a single Terran ship, its black hull pulsing with faint red veins. It drifted silently against a backdrop of stars, impossibly vast, dwarfing any ship ever built by the Council. No weapons fired, no sound played. Only a message, written in glowing human script across every display. The core is next. Image vanished. Across the galaxy, billions stared at their dead screens, waiting, knowing the silence would not last much longer. And in the void between stars, unseen by any surviving sensors, the Black Fleet began to move. The core worlds had always been untouchable. For thousands of years, they were the heart of the galaxy, fortified, shielded, wrapped in layers of fleets and defense grids. While the outer colonies burned, the people of the core believed the Terrans would never reach them. They believed no fleet, no matter how powerful, could cross the walls of steel and fire that guarded the center. But belief could not keep the darkness away. For weeks, skies above the core brimmed with ships. Every empire that still had a fleet sent what they could. Titans the size of cities floated in orbit beside smaller escorts, their weapons charged and shields glowing. On the worlds below, billions prepared for war. Bunkers were filled. Spaceports were shut down. Every broadcast warned citizens to stay indoors, though none could say how staying inside would save them. The leaders met one last time in the Grand Spire, chamber built of crystal and metal that rose high above the council city. Speaker addressed the gathered delegates, her voice shaking but firm. If the Terrans come, we stand together. We have numbers. Yes. We have weapons they have not faced before. They can bleed. Her words were met with silence. No one truly believed them. In the dark between systems, the Terrans were already coming. The first sign was not a fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel. There was no jump signature, no energy surge. Instead, across the entire core sector, the stars themselves began to dim. Not all at once, not as if eclipsed, but like shadows, moving slowly over the sky. Sensors failed to track anything, every system reporting empty space. But the stars kept vanishing. One by one, Then the voices began again. Every channel, every frequency, even those not connected to any network, carried the same sound. Not words, not music, just a slow, deep beat, a pulse. It was too steady to be natural, too loud to be interference. It sounded like a heart, echoing through every ship, every city, every mind. The fleets grew restless. Commanders shouted over comes trying to keep order, but some ships began to drift out of formation. Their crews panicked. The pulse grew louder, then without warning. The stars came back, not because the shadows had gone, but because something far worse had arrived. Hundreds of black shapes appeared across the sector, not emerging from jumps, not accelerating, but simply existing. They were just there, surrounding the core worlds, their smooth, liquid-like hulls glowing faintly with red veins. They didn't move fast. They didn't fire. They just began to close in, silent and steady, like predators. Circling prey, the Council fleets opened fire first. Thousands of weapons, beams, and missiles filled the void with light. For a brief moment, the darkness was driven back by the brilliance of the barrage, and then, just like before, the light vanished every shot. Every missile, every beam absorbed, bent, or simply erased before reaching its target. The black ships didn't even flinch. Then they struck. It wasn't a battle. It was slaughter. The Terrans didn't fire visible weapons. Instead, arcs of red light pulsed from their hulls, each pulse rippling through space like a shockwave. The waves touched. Ships came apart. Not exploded, not burned. They simply disintegrated, their hulls unraveling into dust. Massive dreadnoughts, the pride of the core fleets, vanished in seconds, leaving behind only clouds of debris. The fleets tried to retreat, but space itself betrayed them. Navigation failed. Jump drives overloaded. Every path they plotted twisted, back toward the black ships, as if the void itself had been reshaped to trap them within 10 minutes. Half the core's defense fleets were gone. Within 20, the rest were either destroyed or fleeing blindly into deep space. The Terrans turned their attention to the worlds below. On the surface of the Council's capital world, citizens poured into the streets, staring up at the sky. The black silhouettes blocked out the stars, their red veins pulsing in unison, casting the city below in a faint crimson glow. Alarms wailed, but no one moved. Fear held them frozen. The first pulse came without sound. Buildings shook. Lights went out. Across the planet, every screen flickered, and a single image appeared. A human face, pale and calm, its expression unreadable. When it spoke, the voice carried across every speaker, every device, even into minds. Not connected to any network, you erased us. Now, we erase you. The face vanished. The red glow in the sky intensified. The planet's shields, the strongest ever built, failed in seconds. It's not shattered, drained, as though every drop of power was pulled away. The ground cracked. Oceans boiled. The world's core destabilized in the grand spire. The speaker and the surviving delegates watched from the chamber's massive windows as the sky turned red. Some prayed, some cursed. Some simply stared in silence. No one spoke as the planet began to collapse. Above, the Terran fleet pulsed one last time, their veins glowing bright as the world below tore apart. The fragments of the Council's capital drifted into space, glowing molten red, joining the ring of death that now marked another name erased from the Terran's list. Then, as always, the fleet vanished. No jump signatures, no acceleration. Moment they were there, the next they were gone, slipping back into the dark between stars. Across the surviving core worlds, chaos erupted. Some leaders surrendered to panic, ordering evacuations to uncharted systems. Others swore vengeance, even knowing they had no weapons left that could matter. But most simply waited, knowing they would not have to wait long, because everyone who had seen the Terran fleet, everyone who had heard the endless heartbeat in the dark, understood the same truth. The list was nearly complete, and when it was finished, no one knew if anyone would still be alive to see what came next. The galaxy was a graveyard. The stars still shone, but around many of them there were only fragments of worlds and clouds of wreckage where life once thrived. The great trade routes were empty, the relays silent. Even the pirates, scavengers, and smugglers had vanished. Those who survived the Terran purge hid in deep space, in dead systems and forgotten moons, listening to the dark and praying the shadows would pass them by, but everyone knew they wouldn't. The Terrans were still out there. Their fleet had not been seen for weeks, but no one dared to believe they were gone. The pause only meant one thing: the list was almost complete. In a dark chamber beneath a shattered moon, the last surviving members of the Galactic Council gathered. The once mighty council, which had ruled 1,000 worlds, now consisted of only a handful of leaders, each representing a dying people. Their faces were hollow, their voices quiet, dead, and their hope gone. On the table before them lay the fragment of a Terran transmission recovered from the ruins of the core worlds. It wasn't a threat or a weapon. It was a list. Long, ancient, written in human script most couldn't even read. Each name on the list represented a system, a world, a station. Most were crossed out in crimson. Only one name remained: Villar Prime. The delegates knew the name well. It was not just a world. It was where the Purge War began. It's a place where the cliff-led fleets had first struck at humanity's colonies, wiping out millions in a single day. The war had been brutal, but Villar Prime had been the spark, the reason the purge escalated into extermination. The counselors argued in whispers. Some wanted to warn Villar Prime, to evacuate what few civilians remained. Others wanted to abandon it, to let the Terrans finish their vengeance and hope it would end there. A few believed something worse, that even after the list was complete, the Terrans would not stop. Their debate ended when every light in the chamber went out. A hum filled the air, low and steady, vibrating through the walls. The surviving delegates froze, their eyes wide. Outside the moon's surface, the stars blurred, and a single black silhouette drifted into view. It wasn't one of the smaller Terran ships, the ones that hunted fleets and burned worlds. This one was larger, so large that its shape eclipsed the entire horizon, its red-lit veins glowing faintly like blood in the dark. A voice echoed through the chamber, not from speakers but from the air itself. Calm, steady, human, the list is nearly complete. We'll watch the last name fall. Before anyone could speak, the voice faded, and the ship vanished, leaving only the fading hum in the air. The delegates sat in silence, understanding the message. The Terrans wanted witnesses. They wanted the galaxy to see the final act. On Villar Prime, the people had been preparing for weeks. The world was no longer a center of power. Most of its cities were in ruins, its population a fraction of what it once was. But it still had fortresses, hidden bunkers, and old war machines left from the Purge War. The defenders believed they could at least resist, even if they could not win. When the Terrans arrived, no one even had the chance to fight. The Black Fleet appeared above the planet without warning, without sound, sliding out of the void like shadows given shape. Hundreds of ships formed a perfect ring around the world, their red veins pulsing in rhythm, casting a faint glow over the surface below. There was no demand for surrender. No warning, only silence. Then, for the first time since their return, the Terrans spoke openly to the galaxy. Every surviving relay, every ship, every screen lit up with the image of a single human figure. Its face was calm, its eyes cold. The voice that followed was not filled with rage, but with something far heavier: finality. This is where it began. This is where it ends. On Villar Prime, the skies turned red as the Terran fleet pulsed once, their glow brightening.
Oh, yes.
Planet's defensive grids powered up, but before they could fire, they went dark, their energy drained away. The ground trembled as the oceans boiled, the air itself vibrating with the hum of the fleet above. The planet didn't explode. The Terrans did not fire weapons. Instead, Villar Prime began to break apart from the inside, its core destabilized, its crust shattering like glass within minutes. The world that had started the Purge War was nothing but a ring of glowing fragments circling its dying sun. The Terrans didn't celebrate. They didn't fire a final shot or broadcast a victory message. Instead, the human figure appeared one last time, its face lit by the faint red glow of its fleet. The debt is paid. Across the galaxy, those words echoed through every system. Carried on channels no one could trace, in languages every species could understand. The Terran fleet lingered above the ruins of Velar Prime for a moment longer, their red veins slowly, dimming one by one, then, without a trace, they vanished into the void. For the first time in months, the galaxy was silent. No heartbeat in the coms, no shadows in the stars, no more attacks. But silence brought no comfort, because no one knew where the Terrans had gone. No one knew if they had left forever, or if they were simply waiting again, sleeping until some future slight woke them once more, in the empty halls of the council, where only a few broken leaders remained. One voice finally broke the stillness. If they come back, will there even be anyone left to stop them? No one answered, and somewhere in the deep, in a stretch of uncharted space where no one dared to look, a faint pulse echoed once, then faded. The Terrans were gone. For now.